You wake up to two notifications. One is from your brokerage app, red, a sharp drop, headline screaming sell-off, fear, uncertainty. The other notification is from real life, a message from work, 4 words that make your stomach tighten. Can you talk today? And right there, before you even brush your teeth, you're standing at the edge of a decision most investors never admit they're making. Not a valuation decision, not a portfolio strategy decision, a survival decision. Because when you live with no margin of safety, the market doesn't just move your account balance, it moves you, it pushes you, it corners you. And if you're cornered, you don't invest. You react. You become the one thing Benjamin Graham quietly feared for ordinary people more than ignorance. A forced seller. That's what today is about. Not which stock to buy. Not what the Fed will do next. Not a prediction. Today is about building a margin of safety lifestyle. So you don't get forced into the worst decision at the worst time. And near the end, I'm going to give you one rule, a single sentence that can protect your future self from a lifetime of panic selling, debt stress, and financial self-sabotage. Because the tragedy isn't losing money. The tragedy is knowing what you should do and still being unable to do it when it matters. So let's talk about what margin of safety really means when you're not reading it in a textbook. Let's talk about it the way Graham meant it. As protection first, as survival, as the quiet advantage that doesn't show up in screenshots, but determines who stays in the game long enough to win. Most people think the market is dangerous because it's volatile, but volatility doesn't break you. Fragility breaks you. The market can fall 20% and the world keeps spinning. Companies keep selling. People keep working. Life goes on. But if your life is built on the edge, if you have little cash, high fixed expenses, debt stress, and no breathing room, then every market dip becomes personal. Not because you're dramatic, because you're exposed. And exposure turns normal market behavior into an emergency. That's why 2 investors can experience the same bear market, and one buys calmly, almost quietly, while the other sells in panic, swearing they'll get back in later, and then never really does. The difference isn't IQ, it isn't access, it isn't secret information, it's margin. And Benjamin Graham built his entire philosophy around this one brutal truth. You don't need certainty. You need safety. You don't need a crystal ball. You need room for error, because the future will humble you either way. The only question is whether you built your life to survive that humility. Let me say something that might sting a little, but it's said with respect. If a normal downturn would force you to sell your investments to pay your bills, you're not investing yet. You're using the stock market as a fragile savings account, and that's not an insult, that's a diagnosis. Because it means your greatest risk isn't the market. Your greatest risk is that life will demand cash at the same time Mr. Market is offering you the worst possible price. That's the nightmare scenario Graham wanted ordinary investors to avoid, not because he was pessimistic, because he was honest. He knew the market is not an orderly machine. It's a moody partner. He called it Mr. Market for a reason. Sometimes Mr. Market shows up, euphoric, offering you absurd prices. Sometimes he shows up depressed, offering you bargains. But here's the part most people miss. Mr. Market isn't your boss, unless you need him. If you need him, if you rely on selling at the right time to keep your life afloat, then he becomes your boss. And He is a terrible boss. He calls you at the worst hours. He panics for no reason. He celebrates for no reason. And he will demand decisions from you when you're least emotionally capable of making them. A margin of safety lifestyle is the way you fire him. So what does that lifestyle actually look like? It's not complicated, but it is uncommon because it requires something modern financial culture hates: restraint. Instead of asking, how do I get richer faster? You start asking, how do I stop being vulnerable to my own worst timing? You stop building your life like it must go perfectly, and you start building your life like you will be wrong sometimes, like you will get surprised, like you will have bad months, like you will face layoffs, medical bills, car repairs, rate hikes, recessions, and yes, bear markets. This is not fear. This is adult thinking. This is Graham's world. A world where the first job of an investor is not to make money. The first job is to not lose it and to not lose yourself. So here are the 3 layers of margin of safety. Think of them like 3 doors between you and financial disaster. Most people have 0 doors. They live in a hallway with the storm already inside. But if you build these 3 layers, something powerful happens. Volatility becomes noise again, not a threat, not a command, just noise. Layer 1 is cash margin. Layer 2 is debt margin. Layer 3 is temperament margin. And we're going to walk through each one, not as a boring checklist, but as a mindset shift. Because this channel isn't here to give you hot tips. It's here to train your mind to invest like an intelligent investor. And an intelligent investor starts with a life that can breathe. Let's begin with the most ignored layer in the entire investing world: cash margin. A cash buffer is not a sign you're missing out. It's a sign you're not fragile. It's not dead money. It's oxygen. Because without it, every surprise becomes urgent. And urgency is where your worst decisions live. You know this. You felt it. The car repair that hits at the exact wrong time. The medical bill that arrives when the market is already down. The rent increase. The sudden job uncertainty. And then you look at your portfolio, your so-called long-term plan, and you realize it's not a plan. It's your emergency fund wearing a disguise. So you sell. Not because the company changed, not because the value changed, not because your analysis changed, but because your life had no margin. And this is the quiet truth. Most people don't panic sell because they're weak. They panic sell because they're cornered by bills, cornered by debt, cornered by a lifestyle that leaves no room for error. A cash buffer changes the psychology of everything. It gives you time. It gives you options. It gives you the ability to say, I don't have to touch my investments right now. And that sentence is the beginning of real investing. Now, I'm not here to tell you an exact number of months to hold in cash like it's a universal commandment. Life isn't that clean, but the principle is clean. Your life money and your investing money must not be the same thing. If they are, you are always one surprise away from Mr. Market controlling you. Cash margin is the line that separates I'm participating in the market from I'm dependent on the market. And dependency is the opposite of margin of safety. There's another piece here most people ignore because it sounds too ordinary to matter. Sinking funds. That's just a fancy way of saying you plan for predictable surprises because they're not surprises. Car maintenance isn't a surprise. A dentist Visit isn't a surprise. Annual insurance premiums aren't surprises. Even taxes aren't surprises. But if you treat predictable expenses like unexpected emergencies, you'll keep rating your future to pay your present. And every time you do that, you're training your brain to betray your long-term plan. You're teaching yourself that investing is optional. And that lesson becomes permanent if you repeat it. So cash margin is not just a financial tool, it's a psychological boundary. It tells your nervous system, we're safe. And when your nervous system feels safe, you can think clearly. You can act like an owner. You can be patient. You can let compounding do the heavy lifting. Without that safety, you will always be tempted to grab the wheel at the worst moment. Now, if cash margin is oxygen, debt margin is removing the poison, because debt, especially high-interest consumer debt, is like living with a leak in the bottom of your boat. You can talk about returns all day, but if the boat is leaking faster than you can paddle, you're not going anywhere. You're just exhausting yourself. This is where a lot of ordinary investors get trapped. They want the market to save them. They want a big win, a breakout stock, a perfect entry, a lucky year. But Benjamin Graham would look at that and say, gently but firmly, you're not investing. You're hoping. And hope is not a margin of safety. High interest debt, especially credit card debt, doesn't just reduce your net worth. It reduces your freedom. It narrows your choices. It increases your stress, and stress makes you impulsive. Debt pressure is one of the most reliable ways to turn a rational person into an emotional speculator. Because when you owe money at an ugly interest rate, the clock is always ticking. You can't sit still. You can't wait. You can't be patient. And if you can't be patient, you can't be an investor. So here's a truth most people don't want to hear, but it's liberating once you accept it. Your portfolio cannot outgrow the fragility of your lifestyle. If your monthly obligations are heavy, if your costs are rigid, if your debt is suffocating, you will constantly be tempted to take on more risk than your character can handle. You'll chase volatility. You'll chase hype. You'll chase what's moving, not because you're greedy, because you feel behind. And feeling behind is one of the most expensive emotions in investing. It makes you reach. It makes you rationalize. It makes you buy stories instead of businesses. It makes you pay any price just to feel like you're finally in the game. But the game doesn't reward urgency. The market punishes it, and the punishment is always the same. You buy high, you sell low, you repeat. You call it bad luck, but it's not luck. It's lifestyle fragility. So debt margin is about decreasing your fixed pressure, not to look responsible, to become unforced, to become unpushable, to become the kind of investor who can look at a downturn and say, I'm not in danger. That's the hidden power. And it's why so many people with decent incomes still feel broke, because it's not the income, it's the margin. Now let's talk about the third layer, because even if you have cash margin and debt margin, there's still one more thing that can ruin you, your own mind. Temperament margin. This is where Graham becomes almost philosophical. He knew that markets are not just a place where numbers move. Markets are a place where people reveal themselves. Fear reveals itself. Ego reveals itself. Impatience reveals itself. And if your temperament has no margin, if you're already exhausted, anxious, overstimulated, constantly checking prices, then even a well-built financial plan can collapse under the weight of your own emotions. Temperament margin is the ability to not react, to not be hijacked, to not treat every headline like a personal command. Because the truth is, most investing mistakes aren't analytical mistakes. They're Emotional mistakes. You don't lose money because you can't read a balance sheet. You lose money because you can't sit still. You lose money because you confuse activity with progress. You lose money because you mistake excitement for opportunity. And in a world of endless notifications, Twitter, YouTube, news alerts, experts, finfluencers, your temperament is under attack every day. Mr. Market used to knock on your door occasionally. Now he lives in your pocket. He can reach you in line at Starbucks. He can reach you at the gym. He can reach you at 2 a.m. And he doesn't just offer prices. He offers emotions, panic, FOMO, envy, the feeling that you're missing the one big thing, the feeling that everyone else is winning and you're the only one stuck doing the boring stuff. So temperament margin is building a system where you are not constantly exposed to his mood swings. You start treating noise like junk food. A little is fine. A diet of it will destroy you. This is why the intelligent investor is not someone with perfect intelligence. It's someone with trained restraint, someone who knows their own weakness and designs around it, someone who says, I don't trust my impulses. And that is not insecurity. That is wisdom. Now, at this point, a lot of people ask, okay, so I need margin in life. But what about my portfolio? What should I actually do? And here's where I want to keep this channel honest. Benjamin Graham never wanted ordinary investors to become professional stock pickers overnight. He created a path for the defensive investor, the honest investor, the investor who admits, I have a job, I have a family, I have a life. I'm not going to spend 40 hours a week analyzing companies. Graham respected that person. He built a strategy for that person. And it starts with matching your portfolio to your temperament and your lifestyle. If your life has thin margin, you don't need a more exciting portfolio. You need a more survivable one. Because the goal is not to maximize return in a spreadsheet. The goal is to maximize the chance that you stay invested through decades. Because time is the real advantage. Compounding is not just math, it's behavior sustained for years. So if you're a defensive investor, you don't chase complexity. You don't chase leverage. You don't chase the hottest theme because everyone on the internet is shouting about it. You build something you can hold, something you won't abandon when the headlines get ugly. Something diversified enough that no single mistake can wreck you, and you demand a margin of safety in what you pay, because price matters. Even if you're not a stock picker, the concept still applies. Don't overpay just because you're excited. Don't buy your peace at a premium. Don't confuse a great company with a great price. That confusion has destroyed more portfolios than recessions ever did. Here's a simple way to think about it. A margin of safety in the portfolio is structure, diversification, quality, a process you follow when you're calm. So you don't invent a process when you're afraid. A margin of safety in life is liquidity and flexibility, cash buffer, lower fixed costs, less debt pressure, and a margin of safety in temperament is discipline, boundaries, patience, noise immunity. When these three layers work together, something incredible happens. The market loses its ability to threaten you. It can still surprise you. It can still disappoint you, but it cannot corner you. And if it cannot corner you, it cannot control you. Now, let's pull this into a picture you can remember. Imagine building a bridge. A bridge isn't designed to hold exactly the expected load. A bridge is designed with extra strength because real life brings unexpected load, wind, storms, traffic, time. That extra strength is the margin of safety. And if you build your financial life with no extra strength, if every dollar is committed, every month is tight, every expense is fixed, then you are a bridge built for perfect weather. You might look fine on a sunny day, but storms are not optional. Storms are part of the design of reality. Benjamin Graham's genius was not predicting storms. It was teaching you how to build so storms don't end you. Now I want to talk about the moment most people fail. The moment when this philosophy stops being a concept and becomes a test. It's when the market falls and the world feels uncertain. It's when your friends start texting about what they're selling. It's when the news plays dramatic music. It's when the internet turns investing into a sporting event. And inside you, a thought appears. Maybe I should do something. That thought is Mr. Market knocking. And here's the question that determines whether you're an intelligent investor or a lifelong reactor. Are you being asked to act because the value changed or because your emotions changed? Margin of safety gives you the power to pause, to check reality, to ask better questions. Not, will it go up tomorrow? But do I have enough margin to wait? Because waiting is not passive. Waiting is a strategy when you are prepared. Most people can't wait because their life can't wait. And that is the entire point of today's video. This isn't about becoming a genius. It's about becoming unforced. So here's a simple protocol you can run when anxiety hits. Not as a rigid rule, just as a mental checkpoint. When you feel the urge to react, ask, do I have cash? Margin. Or am I depending on my portfolio for bills? Do I have debt pressure that's making me desperate? Am I consuming noise that's inflaming my temperament? If the answer is yes, I'm depending on yes, I'm pressured, yes, I'm inflamed, then the problem is not the market. The problem is margin. And the solution is not a new stock. The solution is rebuilding your life so you have room for error. Now let's return to the scene we started with. You wake up red in the market. Message from work. In the old version of you, that combination triggers panic. You sell because you need control. You sell because you need relief. You sell because you're trying to reduce uncertainty. But selling doesn't reduce uncertainty. It just locks in regret. In the new version of you, the margin of safety version, you wake up and you see the same red, but your body doesn't flood with urgency. Because you're not depending on Mr. Market to survive the week. You have cash buffer. You have lower fixed pressure. You've reduced debt stress. You've trained yourself to treat noise as noise. So you can do something most people can't do, nothing. You can let the market do what it does. You can let companies keep operating. You can let time work. You can keep your plan. And that is what separates ordinary investing from intelligent investing. Not brilliance, stability, not excitement, resilience. Now, here's the rule I promised you. One sentence. Write it down mentally. Carry it with you. Because if you live by this, you will avoid the worst moments that destroy most investors. Never build a life that forces you to sell at the worst time. That's it. Never build a life that forces you to sell at the worst time. Because the market's greatest cruelty is not that prices drop, it's that prices drop when weak hands are forced to act. And weak hands aren't weak because they're stupid. They're weak because they have no margin. So if you take anything from this video, take this. Most people chase return. Intelligent investors chase safety. Most people try to win quickly. Intelligent investors try to survive indefinitely. Most people live financially on the edge and call it normal. Intelligent investors build margin and call it freedom. A margin of safety lifestyle is not flashy. It won't impress anyone at a party. It won't make for viral screenshots, but it will give you something the modern world quietly steals from people every day: peace. And peace is a competitive advantage because peace lets you think. Peace lets you wait. Peace lets you buy when others are panicking. Peace lets you ignore Mr. Market's mood swings. Peace lets you become the kind of person who can hold a good asset for a long time. And compounding only works for people who can hold. So today, don't ask, how do I get richer faster? Ask, how do I stop being fragile? How do I build cash margin? How do I reduce debt pressure? How do I protect my temperament from noise? Because when you build those 3 layers, you don't just become a better investor, you become harder to break. And in the real world, that is the ultimate edge. If you want, replay this video on a walk tomorrow. Let it sink in. Let it reformat your instincts. Because the goal isn't to know these ideas. The goal is to become the person who lives them, especially when it's uncomfortable, especially when it feels boring, especially when the internet is screaming for action, because that's when intelligent investing begins, and that's when your future self quietly smiles years from now, because you stopped living with no margin of safety.